Good day, everyone. This is Professor Theo, welcoming you back to Intercultural Communication. This is a video on the chapter entitled Intercultural Communication in the Workplace. Intercultural communication in the workplace. Why is this important? Well, it's important because if we are honest, I think about myself when I was in college, I think about you all now that you're in school. Rarely do we go to college simply because we love learning. We love knowledge and we can't get enough of reading and can't get enough of homework. If we're honest, one of the primary reasons why we go to college and why you're in college is because we hope that one day, if we worked hard enough and got good grades, that our schooling would pay off and that we would get a good job, a high paying job. And if you look at the changing surroundings in our society, you're going to notice that over time, the workplace has become more and more diverse. If we'd been born in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and working during that time, the workplace wasn't that diverse. It was primarily white male dominated, especially in a lot of industries. And over time, because of changes in laws, changes in policies, changes in cultural values, the workplace became more and more diverse. And it's probably as diverse as ever right now. Now, does that mean things are perfect? Of course not. There's still a glass ceiling. Unfortunately, there's still some barriers in which women have a hard time climbing to the ranks, or people of color have a hard time climbing to the ranks. But now more than ever, there's an opportunity for everyone, especially if you have an entrepreneurial spirit and work hard, and you can climb the ladder in a lot of industries. And so things have grown, but there's still a need to grow in this area. And so we want to talk about intercultural communication and diversity in the workplace. And we're going to primarily look at two things. The first thing we're going to look at, and this is found in your PowerPoints if you want to download these slides off of Canvas, entitled Intercultural Communication in the Workplace, it'd be great to follow along with this video. First, we're going to look at both the benefits and the challenges of having a diverse workplace. And we're not talking about diversity in terms of institutions having a diverse consumer base or diverse clientele. For example, as students, you're all the consumers, you're the clienteles of this institution called Bethel University. And we are growing in terms of diversity at the student population. What we're looking at primarily though is the workers, administration, faculty, staff. So Nike may have diversity when it comes to how they market, but is Nike a diverse institution in terms of their employees? That's what we're looking at. And so there are two benefits we want to look at, two benefits of having a diverse workforce. The first one is called the value added perspective. Once again, that's the value added perspective. And what this simply means is if you have this particular perspective, you're under the notion that there is value added to any institution when it increases its diversity. So if an institution goes from being monocultural or a monolith to a more diverse culture in terms of gender, in terms of race and ethnicity, in terms of age, in terms of diversity of thought, the idea is that that diversity enriches and adds value to that particular institution. And the idea is that it creates a competitive advantage. So if you are company A and you have a diverse workforce, the idea is that you would have a competitive advantage over company B that does not have a diverse workforce. And you would have a competitive advantage for these reasons. One, enriched problem-solving capabilities. Most companies, most institutions, churches, schools, whatever the business is, or this institution is, you're going to come up with some problems. There are going to be some barriers. There's going to be some obstacles. And if everyone in the company, if everyone in the organization thinks alike, if everyone comes from the same background, if everyone has the same cultural perspective, you may be inclined to be able to solve certain types of problems. But then, what about these other types of problems that are kind of foreign to you? Or this other thinking that's kind of outside the box for you? Well, the more diverse people you have working for you, the more diverse people on your staff, the more diversity in the organization, all of a sudden now you got this collection of minds from different backgrounds, different experiences, different frames of reference, different ways of thinking about things. All of a sudden now when those problems come, when those obstacles come, you have a greater chance to solve those problems creatively because now you have a richness of diversity of thought, diversity of background, culturally speaking. It also comes with creativity and marketing and getting that product out and reaching your clientele. Once again, if we're all of the same culture, we think that the way we reach the clientele is one particular way. Here's our tried and true way. Here's how we've always done it. Well, when you try to reach a diverse population, it makes sense to have individuals in your organization that are also diverse because who can better reach them than them? And so I think about whenever I'm trying to reach young people, I link up with some other young people who can school me, who can say, hey, here's what we need. Here's what we would appreciate. If I'm thinking about how to reach my wife, I could ask my sister, other women who I trust. If I'm thinking about reaching someone from a different country or a different culture, ethnically speaking, I would link up with a cultural ally from that culture. In other words, you're not just simply doing research based upon reading some books, but when you can link up with individuals, when you have those individuals on your team, you're going to be more apt to reach people who look like them, who act like them, who think like them. And so the more diverse your team is in any organization, it adds value. Another benefit is this concept of globalization. The world is expanding. And the reason why the world is expanding is because technology allows us to reach all over now. So it used to just be that as a company, as an organization, as a church, you had your niche market. You just focused on this one area. Now, in order to be successful, you have to be willing and able to branch out, to reach out. And now we have the capability, if so willing to take advantage of it, to reach out around the whole world. And so why not have people in your organization that are world travelers? Why not have people in your organization that are from all parts of the world, who have different perspectives, who's been some places that you maybe have not been, who has some insights into some different populations that you may not have insights into. And so some of the most successful companies have globalized. Some of the most successful companies in the US have branches and satellite companies all over the world. They have a branch in London, a branch in this place, a branch in that place. And they have individuals working in those branches who are indigenous of those countries. So they don't just send Americans over there, they send some Americans, but they also have a leadership that is reflective of those populations that they are serving. That's strategic. And you see it all the time when, a company like McDonald's, they have commercials that are ethnically diverse and strategically targeting certain people groups. And when they show their commercials in a state or a city that has a predominantly Spanish-speaking population or a large Spanish-speaking population, they may have the commercial in Spanish. Or they may have it in English, but they have a Latino or Hispanic person in the commercial. And not just in the commercial as a customer, but also in the commercial as a worker or a manager. They show them in leadership positions. Very strategically, they're marketing their product to these particular ethnic cultural groups by highlighting and showcasing those particular cultures, putting them in a good light. So, but you can't do that if you don't have diversity in your organization. And so it would be wise, you would think, that the more diverse the organization, the better off it is. However, not everyone sees it that way. And so there are some disadvantages, or at least some challenges, when it comes to diversity in the workplace. One potential challenge is what we call the potential barrier perspective. And that simply surmises that one of the potential barriers that may take place is that some of the interactive processes and some of the overall performance of the country may be hindered if you have too much diversity. And that sounds interesting. Like, how could diversity hinder production? How could diversity hinder interaction? How could diversity hinder performance? Well, those who adhere to this particular perspective, they work under the premise that sometimes it's harder to get something done when you have too many different voices in the room. Too many cooks in the kitchen. So we are brainstorming in a meeting about how to best reach a particular audience. And if we all think alike, we may be limited in the options, but from a timing standpoint, we would get a lot of stuff done because we would all be in agreement of what we should be doing. Someone throws out an idea, someone seconds that, someone thirds, we vote, and we rock and roll. We're all on the same page. Now, it just so happens that all the ideas are very similar, but we get the ideas out there and we get it done quickly. But imagine you have diversity of thought. Imagine you have people from different cultural perspectives. You have women and men in the room with equal voice. You have blacks and Latinas and Asians and other ethnic groups in the room with equal voice. You have the young and the old with equal voice. You have those from the Midwest and those from the East Coast and those from the West Coast in the room with equal voice. All of a sudden now we ask one question: how can we best reach this audience? And you have all these different perspectives. It adds the richness, but if not done correctly, it could also add some chaos. It could add some distraction. We could get so bogged down with all these great ideas that we never finalize and decide on one, and we end up getting behind. Or maybe because of different cultural backgrounds, different cultural upbringings, different cultural perspectives, now there's a different expectation on how a certain job should be done. And an assignment is put out there. Someone from one culture put it out there, someone from another culture received it. They did this job to the best of their ability, but from a cultural perspective that what this thing meant. And all of a sudden now, when it's turned in, the one who put it out looks at this thing and doesn't think that it's up to the standard. Well, maybe it was done well, but it was done for a different cultural understanding. You told me to put out a commercial that best reached this particular people group. Well, I did that from my cultural perspective. Based upon my knowledge of this group, here's what I did. Well, now it's obvious that the person who put the assignment out there had a different perspective and a different understanding and a different expectation about what this commercial was going to turn out like. And so sometimes when you have these different cultural minds, these different cultural backgrounds in the same room, there could be a disconnect when we're trying to connect because we're coming from all different places. Now, is that legit? I think it's legit. Now, do I think that should be enough reason why a company would say, let's not be too diverse? I don't think it's to that point. But I think it is a legitimate perspective that when you have too many different voices in the room, sometimes we do have a tendency not to get as much done. And what that does is it causes those who are in leadership to get so frustrated that they say, I'll do it myself. And all of a sudden now when they do it themselves, it's going to be done from their perspective. And all of a sudden now those who are in the hierarchy, those who are in the top levels of leadership, begin to once again just simply dictate what goes on. So all of a sudden now everything becomes monocultural again. So you can have this diversity in the workplace, but if the person in charge is of one particular culture, normally predominantly white, male, if they eventually says, we tried to do this diversity thing, but you know what, for time's sake, I'll just figure it out. Well, if that person does that 5 times in a row, all of a sudden now, how diverse really are you? Because now it's still, bottom line is, it's still coming down from the top and it's still coming from the same perspective. And finally, the last challenge is that sometimes organizations simply have a poor analysis or a poor assessment of the diversity issues that may exist in their particular organization. And so organizations, if they're wise, will eventually assess themselves, will eventually see where they're at in terms of diversity. What are they doing well? How could they improve? And oftentimes, depending upon who's assessing and how the assessment goes, there may not be an accurate assessment done. There may not be a reality check of exactly where they are at in terms of diversity. And 2 things normally lead to this mixed diagnosis. 2 things normally lead to this ill assessment. One is they don't include enough voices of minorities in the assessment. What we mean by that is this. You have this organization that may be predominantly white, but it does have some minority voices. Minorities in terms of race and ethnicity, minority in terms of gender, and maybe age. Other things. And then what they do is they fail to invite those voices to the table. And then when they assess themselves and they ask the question, how well are we doing? Well, if they only ask individuals who act like, look like, think like them, all of a sudden now they get high marks on the assessment. And they see themselves better than what they ought to see themselves. However, if they bring in the right individuals, those who have been marginalized, those who are in the minority culture, and ask them that same question, how well do you think we're doing? All of a sudden now they may get some answers that may blow their mind. They may get some answers that don't match up with the answers of the majority culture. They may get some answers that seem so out of place, like, I thought we were doing so well. But when they don't allow those minority voices to the table to speak out, then the assessment isn't as accurate as it needs to be. And lastly, not only can they fail by not having enough minority voices being assessed, there also may be a failure when they include too many individuals who are just simply insensitive or simply indifferent or simply, for lack of better words, they lack awareness of the extent of the problem. So if they interview people and say, how do you think we're doing? If individuals don't think that there's a problem at all, if they don't think that lack of diversity is an issue, or if their mind, they think that the place is more diverse than what it actually is, all of a sudden now this company gets a higher assessment than what they really should get. Because all of a sudden they're interviewing people who say, I think things are going well. Well, things may very well be going well for them, but what about the minorities in the organization? And so it's sometimes a barrier because the organizations don't do due diligence to see exactly where they're at in terms of diversity in the workplace. All right, we have one more slide.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
This is a brief interruption. In fact, this is Professor Theo interrupting Professor Theo, who's now shooting a lecture. I want to interrupt this lecture just briefly to pose this particular question. And here's the question. You've just learned about some of the benefits and the challenges of diversity in the workplace. In your opinion, which perspective do you lean towards? Do you see it as a positive, or do you see the challenges? Or do you see both? With 125 words to 150 words, email me your response to this particular question. Don't post it on Canvas, email me. And if you email me, you get something extra. This has been a brief interruption. Now I return you back to your normally scheduled lecture on intercultural communication in the workplace. And in this particular slide, we're going to be looking at the definition of cultural diversity in the workplace, and then we're going to look at 3 levels or 3 types of organizations that exist in terms of culture, in terms of diversity. And so cultural diversity is the representation in one social system of people with distinctly different group affiliations of cultural significance. Key words. So this is all in one system, so in one organization, in one institution, people with distinctly different. So we're not talking about, sometimes we can get real slick when it comes to cultural diversity. And say if we hire, a company has a pretty much balanced mix on men and women. And they have a pretty balanced mix in terms of racial and ethnic diversity. But let's say, although aesthetically, from the eye test, you see diversity, but let's say that all the blacks, all the whites, all the Hispanic and Latinos, all the Asians, all of the young people, all the old people, all the men, all the women, say they all came from the same hometown. And they all have a similar background, they all have a similar mindset, then all of a sudden those individuals may look culturally diverse, but they think the same way. So all of a sudden it's really not as diverse as it seems. So they have to be distinctly different in their cultural affiliations, and they have to be distinctly different in how they think. Now, when it comes down to this diversity, they have 3 different types of categories that the organization may fall in. First, you have monolithic organizations. And mono normally means one. So you think about monopoly. That means one company has everything. So monolithic. So one type, one culture is predominantly represented in this organization. This is an organization where the members of the organization predominantly come from the major group. So whatever the major group is in that particular region, say if you were in a region where predominantly people are white, and maybe even white males, all of a sudden it says that this company has predominantly white males in the company. And if there are any minorities, women, people of color, they're normally restricted to the lower level of hierarchy. So they have like the lower level jobs. If you're thinking about a company that works up from the president on down, you would have the minorities working in the mailroom or working grounds and housekeeping, maybe delivering supplies, doing things of that nature, whereas the higher ups would be of the majority culture. So on the statistics, they may be to say, 90% of the company is white, 10% are minorities, and that 10% are at the lower level. The next up, maybe they get the revelation that, hey, it'd be good business if we become more diverse, and they actually make an effort for the right reasons, sometimes for the wrong reasons, to become more diverse. And all of a sudden they become a plural organization. This is where the population of the majority of the employees reflect the surrounding society, reflect the surrounding community. So say if you live in a community and society is becoming more and more diverse, well, your organization should reflect that. So if you're in a city where it's a lot of diversity, this organization starts to look like that city in terms of numbers, in terms of percentages. Yet, the minorities are still often restricted to the lower levels. So whereas the first company, which was monolithic, they were 90% white and then 10% minority, maybe this company is 50% white, 50% minority. But those 50% are still relegated to lower level positions. That's a plural. But statistically, when they do their report, they can be like 50% of our employees are minorities, women, and people of color. It looks good on paper, but when you actually go into the building, when you see the organization operate, you notice that all the minorities are in the kitchen cooking or they're cleaning, and the women are over here, and the blacks are over. And you notice, hey, that it looks good statistically speaking, but from a power hierarchical and value structure, they're still lower level. And then finally, you have multicultural organizations. This is when not only do you have the statistics that say our company is reflective of the greater society in terms of our statistical populations of minorities, but now minorities often are seen in some of the higher up positions also. So you have women who are CEOs, you have blacks and Latinos and Latinas and Hispanics who are CEOs, and you have Asians, Americans who are CEOs, you maybe even have Native Americans who are the face of the company. All said now, it's not just something you can put on your report, 50%. Now it's the president, it's the vice president, it's higher up, it's in positions of authority. And so I know oftentimes as a pastor, I would talk to my other pastor friends about predominantly white churches, and these are my white pastors friends who have predominantly white churches, and most of the minorities at their church would be at the youth level. So they would have kids and children who were diverse ethnically and culturally speaking, but no adults in the room, and definitely not on the leadership. And their whole thing was that one day, though, if we keep pouring into these kids, maybe 15, 20 years from now, they'll be the leadership. And my thing is like, that's great 15, 20 years from now, but where are their parents at? Why aren't you pouring into them? Why do you not have a pastoral staff or a committee or some other people in leadership who look like those children? You know, so it's one thing to simply have diversity at the lower level. Can we also have diversity at the higher level? And I think that's important. And it's important for you all because when you graduate, you're going to go into these organizations. And hopefully these organizations have the revelation of the importance of diversity. Diversity in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of thought. And if not, maybe you can be the ones who break down those barriers. Maybe you can be the ones who really help those organizations grow in this particular area. All right. So once again, this has been Professor Theo. I hope all is well. Take care. God bless.